Okay, folks, welcome back to Shadowlands. Going to do a state of for Subtlety Rogue. Reached level 55 and did so mostly doing Battlegrounds. Did a few dungeons, mostly Battlegrounds. So this will be more PvP focused. Want to show you the rotation I figured out. Before that, though, let's look at the abilities and talents. So the baseline abilities are pretty much what you would expect. They're mostly things we've had for a while now. We got Shiv and Slice and Dice back, which is kind of nice. I don't, admittedly, I kind of use Shiv because it applies a poison. I find I don't really use Slice and Dice that often. Typically, if I'm out of combat and I have combo points, I will, because there's not really much to use combo points on outside of combat. But outside of that, not too much. If we look at specific abilities, we got Dark Powder, which is the subtlety equivalent of Crimson Tempest. Finishing move that launches explosive black powder at up to 8 nearby targets, dealing physical damage. Does very low damage, of course. It is an AoE ability. I was really disappointed in PvE when I did some dungeons that this wasn't better. I kind of thought there's times you can kind of stack AoE damage. I could spam Shuriken Storm, and then generates one combo point per target hit. So I could almost use Shuriken Storm and then Black Powder just back and forth, basically until I ran out of energy. And it just really did not seem to do much. I was very disappointed. If this got a bit of a buff, I think it would be better. As it stands now, though, it's a bit of an underwhelming AoE ability. Although, to be fair, rogues aren't really known for their AoE ability, so I suppose you can give it a pass on those grounds. And yeah, so that's your abilities. Talents haven't really changed. They did make one change, which was Find Weakness was a talent. Cheap Shot and Shadow Strike reveal a flaw in your target's defenses, causing all of your attacks to bypass 30% of that enemy's armor for 18 seconds. And they replaced it with Premeditation. After entering Stealth, your next Shadow Strike grants up to 10 seconds of Slice and Dice, and generates 2 additional combo points if Slice and Dice is active. So there you go. So where was it here? Baseline abilities. So it said 10 seconds. So that would be not quite 1 combo point. As I said, I don't generally find that I use Slice and Dice terribly too often, so I couldn't really see this being all that beneficial. Speaking of Find Weakness, though. Okay, folks. So this is me editing in post, and there were a few things I neglected to mention. So what I've decided to do is edit this small part in and then just let the video play out as it was going to. So when this part ends, what I'm going to try to explain is that Gloom Blade and Find Weakness have the same effect. Gloom Blade, when critical strikes, applies Find Weakness for 6 seconds. Find Weakness when applied through Cheap Shot and or Shadow Step. Apply the same effect, bypassing 30% for 18 seconds. In Battle for Azeroth, it was 40% for 10 seconds. And Gloom Blade didn't have this effect at all. It just said bypassing armor, and then that's where the tooltip ended. So I'm not exactly sure if one cancels the other out, if bypassing armor means 100%, if it's still the percentage of find weakness. I'm not entirely sure. It's a bit of a unusual situation. I'm not sure how many times in the game we've had a situation where you had two abilities that, albeit were triggered in somewhat different ways, that had the same effect. The other thing I wanted to mention was that Cheap Shot got its combo points nerfed from 2 to 1. I saw something where Cheap Shot was one of the longest abilities in the game that had no changes until Shadowlands, where the combo points were changed. And I did notice it. I just, for some reason, did not mention it. So, the only other thing I wanted to mention was the Covenant abilities. I had deliberately left them out, thinking I might make a second video just specifically for Covenant abilities. And then after I had made the video and everything, I had decided just to add them in somewhere, since they are part of the expansion and the patch, albeit not a part of the baseline abilities for the class, as far as leveled abilities you get while leveling talents, things like that. So for Rogue, the class ability, the only one that can use it is Rogue, is Flagellation, which in the broadest overview, when you use it, for every combo point you use, and then you use the ability again, it will give you a haste buff, which sounds really good, especially for a rogue. Energy is a big thing, haste is a big thing. However, in PvP, which is what I did a lot of before I made this state of video, it was very difficult to use in PvP. Now, it does have an internal cooldown that will trigger the overall cooldown if you don't use the ability again. However, it just the overall concept of it just doesn't seem to, or I couldn't get it to work as well with Rogue as you would think it would. You do have slice and dice, so it's not as though you are without means of getting haste. I have noticed that a lot of the Covenant abilities that I have seen as class abilities are a bit mediocre, I would say. The Night Fae ability my monk has is actually pretty decent, because it is just straightforward. It does healing damage, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't do much of anything else. So switching between specs, monk being a hybrid class with tank DPS and healing, you don't have to think too much about switching back and forth. It kind of does something for each spec. This, again, because it's focused around haste, you think would be really good for Rogue. I didn't see a great DPS loss when I didn't use it in Battlegrounds. I didn't see a big DPS gain when I did. It's just kind of there. So I'm not sure if at max level, I am still level 55. If by the time you reach level 60 and things have scaled a little more, and then you start to get gear and everything, if the ability changes, as some abilities do once you reach max level and start gearing yourself a little better. Um, so yeah, and I do also want to apologize for all the sniffles. Apparently, my nose was running that day, and it is, as the video progresses, it gets progressively worse. So apologies for that, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Um, Gloom Blade is what I did take. Punctures your target with your Shadow Infused Blade for X amount of shadow damage. Bypassing armor, critical strikes apply fine weakness for 6 seconds. So I'm not entirely sure if I am reading this correctly, or if I am negating one ability or the other, because this basically does the same thing that fine weakness does. Although the durations are different. This says applies it for 6 seconds. This says it applies it for 18 seconds. I took this because Backstab has the requirement. Let me switch over here so I can show you. Backstab has the requirement that damage increased by 20% when you are behind your target. So that was a big thing for rogues at one time, was being behind your target. Not sure if it's true for player targets. I know some NPCs and bosses and things like that can't dodge or parry if you are behind them. Which is why you typically see like hunter pets or warlock minions will end up behind the boss or what have you, because they can't dodge or parry that way. I'm thinking the same is true for players. Wouldn't swear to it, but I'm thinking that that is true as well. It's very difficult to stay behind your target in PvP. Gloom Blade seemed like a better, more straightforward option. Bypassing armor is usually pretty good. Bypassing armor and physical damage are about the best you can do. So this seemed like a better option. I'm still somewhat very much kind of playing around with talents, namely Dark Shadow and Enveloping Shadow, so bear that in mind. Dark Shadow, shadow damage is increases damage by 30%. Enveloping Shadows, Deepening Shadows reduces the remaining cooldown of Shadow Dance by an additional 0.5 seconds per combo point spent. Shadow Dance gained 1 additional charge. So it's the 1 additional charge that I'm kind of debating over. Deepening Shadows, your finishing moves reduce the remaining cooldown on Shadow Dance by 1 second per combo point spent. So this adds, so it's 1.5 seconds per combo point spent. And it has a 1 minute cooldown. And allows you to use abilities and grant all of the combat benefits of stealth for 9 seconds. And increase damage by 30%. Effect not broken from taking damage or attacking. Normally stealth is broken once you attack, unless you have subterfuge, which allows you to stay or allow you to use abilities for 3 seconds after breaking stealth. So yeah, so that's my current setup. So this is the setup I've done the best with so far. I set a goal for myself that, when possible, I would try to steal a base in in a battleground. And you might think, well, that sounds kind of like a somewhat of a simplistic goal. Yeah, there's a little more. It sounds a little more involved than what it actually is, um, because it gets you practice. You have to incapacitate whoever's guarding the base, steal their flag, re-stealth in order to stun and use your DPS abilities and all of that to use Shadow Strike. And then you have to either hope that someone comes to help you, or you have to try to DPS them down yourself. So it's good practice for familiarizing yourself with all the abilities and everything like that, rather than running around trying to do something and getting nothing done. So I said I was going to try to steal one base. If I stole more than that, fine, great. The best, my best map so far, my best battleground so far is probably Deepwind Gorge. I managed to steal 3 there. And the last one actually won us the game. I think compared to like Arathi Basin, where the bases are closer together, Deepwind Gorge, you have to run around more. And if you've played on the new Deepwind Gorge map, everyone is fighting over mid. So the other 4 bases around the map can pretty well be stolen a little easier. I have managed to do it in Arathi Basin. However, it's a lot quicker for teams to react. And you can get ganged up on a lot quicker, in which case you end up either dying or you end up vanishing, and then they know you're there, so they're not gonna, they kind of hang around, and then you kind of have to run to another one, and yeah, it can end up being, you can end up spending a good portion of your time kind of running around the map trying to figure out, where you can steal a base. So, at which point you have to ask, was that the best use of your time? And was that the best benefit you could give to your team? So, all that said, the rotation that I figured out, normally how stealth works for rogues is you use your stealth abilities, stealth-specific abilities, which usually consist of Cheap Shot, which is your stun, Ambush, which I believe all 3 specs had, and then 1 or 2 had Groat. So between those, you would stun, you would build up combo points, do a little bit of damage, and then you would run through your regular rotation. What they've done with Subtlety is made it so you can use your stealth abilities more often as your regular rotation, initially through stealth and then through Shadow Dance later on. So the rotation that I will use is Shadow Dance. Helps if you actually target something. So Shadow Dance. Shadow Strike has a built-in Shadow Step. However, Shadow Step does not break stealth. So you can get behind the target and still stay stealth. Generally, what I will do is Cheap Shot once or twice. Right now, nobody has an honorable medallion, so a lot of players aren't breaking stealth. So I will use Cheap Shot and then spam Shadow Strike to use Kidney Shot, which by that point, Cheap Shot's more or less about wore off. And then while Cheap Shot is on, Shadow Dance, spam Shadow Strike, and then try to get Rupture out. And by that point, the player has lost about half their health. So it's either a matter of rinse and repeat from there, either vanish and repeat everything again, or just try to use your regular rotation and try to just burn them down. Or ideally, someone has come to help you and you can kind of do a 2 versus 1 kind of thing, which tends to happen depending on the um, map. So, yeah. So there you go, folks. So as I said, this is about the best setup I've found so far. I'm still playing around with talents. So this maybe wasn't my kind of normal in-depth kind of state of. I do like to do them before I reach max level, just because the gameplay varies a little bit. I did a lot of battlegrounds to get to 55. I was trying to level up my honor, so played subtlety the whole time, so felt like I had a fairly good grasp of everything. Didn't really focus on the PvP abilities in Legion as much. Focused more on the talents. They swapped quite a bit of the talents around, and you could almost argue they completely overhauled subtlety a little bit compared to assassination and outlaw. They kind of focused on outlaw in um, warlords, and then seemed to focus on subtlety in Battle for Azeroth. So, yeah. So there you go, folks. Hope that was helpful for you. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching.